Hey, you guys, Erin here. So today we're going to dive into the sign of Leo in medical astrology. In case you're new here, I'm going through each one of the zodiac signs and making a series to talk about how these signs rule over certain parts of our body, like our anatomy, and have an influence on our physiology and so on and so forth. And the reason I'm doing this is because most people have no idea what medical astrology is, which I do find a little bit of a shame because this is definitely something that we can use as a precautionary tool. Say an infant is born, we can look at the chart and say, you know what, this child might want to be a little bit careful with their lungs or their brain or their feet or whatever it is. We can see a lot of this stuff in the chart. But also, this is something that was very much relied on, especially in Renaissance times. A doctor absolutely had to be trained in astrology in order to practice medicine. This is something that can help us get to the root of somebody's problem. This is also something, say, that can tell us when to have surgery or when not to have surgery, that sort of thing. And so that's why I guess maybe I'm trying to bring this back into popularity here. Now, I want to give credit where credit is due. I learned most of my medical astrology training through the Academy for Astrological Medicine, which is a fantastic school. The original school that I went to was the American Federation School of Astrologers, which was a really, really good school. I mean, it gave me enough to go on to a professional level, but then my desire to learn medical astrology, even if I didn't want to work with medical astrology at all, that school medical astrology period gave me a much clearer understanding as to just overall astrology, how astrology works, the signs, the houses, especially the aspects, the celestial bodies, so on and so forth. So even if you're somebody who just wants to know astrology, the Academy for Astrological Medicine is a great school. I will leave a link for that in the description below. And also, let me say this as well, that this is somewhat of a disclaimer here. I'm not a licensed physician, so I can't offer you any kind of medical advice. We can say that this is for hypothetical purposes, or this is for entertainment purposes here. We, as medical astrologers, have to find little loopholes to be able to offer information to people unless we are a licensed physician. Okay, so first, what we're going to do is we're going to just break down the sign of Leo just in general here. And then we're going to talk about how this works, the theory as to how these signs rule over certain parts of our body. Then we're going to go through each part of the body that the sign of Leo rules. Leo rules some very, very important parts of the body. And then we'll start by going through some potential things that could go on for people who were born with their sun in the sign of Leo. But then we'll talk about people born with their moon in Leo, people born with their Mercury in Leo, people born with their Venus, their Mars, their Saturn, their Uranus. And we will touch on Neptune and Pluto in the sign of Leo, maybe a little bit more of Pluto. It just doesn't so much apply to the generations that are around today, but a little bit, but not much. And then also we'll touch on North and South Node in Leo and Leo rising. Okay, so let's get into this. So first of all, the sign of Leo is what we call fixed fire. Fixed means it holds the energy in, okay? All the fixed signs come in the middle of a season. These are the modalities, okay? There's fixed, cardinal, and mutable. Cardinal signs come in the beginning of a season. They come with force to project us forward. Mutable signs come at the end of a season. They mutate the energy so that the cardinal sign can then project the new energy forward. Fixed signs come right smack in the middle of a season. Leo is right smack in the middle of summer, okay? Fixed signs tend to like to do things with consistency, persistency, in a steadfast way. They are not recognized for adaptability, that sort of thing, because they're just, oh, well, this is the way things are. Sometimes they can get their opinions stuck on one thing and not want to change their mind, that sort of thing, going with the fixed signs. Now, in the element of fire, fire in Western astrology is directly associated with energy. Okay, this is a very energetic sign. In fact, the sign of Leo is very well recognized as having a good, strong constitution because it can hold the energy in, versus the other fire signs, Aries and Sagittarius, are a little bit more, have a tendency to overexert themselves. Aries, the energy just goes flying out through the top of the head, versus Sagittarius, it's more like wildfire that's all over the place. Leo can hold the energy in. When we think about, at least for most of us in the world, maybe not in Australia and certain places, but for most of us in the world, when it's Leo season, like when the sun moves into the sign of Leo, the hottest time of the year. Okay, that's when we need to stay hydrated, that sort of thing. Now, the sign of Leo is ruled by the sun. Okay, this is almost like the sign of royalty. When we think about the sun, clearly the brightest light in the sky, the sign of Leo can tend to kind of be the brightest light wherever it goes. It's a sign of playful courage and outspokenness. It's got leadership qualities. And as I've mentioned before, and he certainly doesn't mind me sharing this, but my father is a perfect example. He's a Leo sun, Leo rising, Mercury in Leo, and Pluto in Leo. All this comes through his first house. He's like the epitome of a Leo. He's 6'4", always wore a cowboy hat, and everywhere we would go, he's still to this day. Howdy, how you doing? How you doing over there? He's very outspoken and playful like this. Okay. Now, when you think about the sun that gives us energy, that's really what we get our vital force from the sun. Sign of Leo tends to have a great vital force. Now, the sign of Leo, the motto is I will. This is a sign of willpower. You will notice a lot of Leos. They'll set the goal and they go after it with consistency and willpower because it's that fixed sign, fixed fire with the energy to go forward, but at the same time sticking to, the routine. Okay. Now, it's represented by the lion. When we think about the lion, it's like the king or the queen of the jungle, okay? Lions are obviously quite courageous. We think about the big, the manes on the male lions, that's very Leo energy, but they're also very, very playful creatures. Sign of Leo wants to enjoy life, but with courage. Okay, so hopefully that gives you just an idea of this Leo energy in and of itself. So the way that this works is, or at least like the more commonly recognized theory as to how this works, so we'll just start by saying this. The sign of Leo rules the heart, amongst other things, but just if we think about the heart and the back, the spine. People who are born with their sun in the sign of Leo, they would receive their vital force, boom, right through the heart. Okay, this is again a sign that can have incredible longevity as long as it's doing something to enjoy life and staying hydrated. Okay. And something else I'm going to mention here is that certainly I've met several shy Leos. They are out there. I think one of them, if I remember correctly, she was a Leo, but she was a Pisces rising and Saturn was right on the ascendant. She was very reserved. Okay. So there are things in the chart that can counteract this stuff. But the sign of Leo in and of itself, most Leo people they come with that heart energy. They tend to be loyal. They tend to be affectionate. Okay. Now, and when we think about it this way as well, say, for example, I myself am a Pisces, the very, very end of Pisces season, 28.5 degrees Pisces sun. I get my vital force through the tips of my toes. Like Pisces doesn't tend to have the greatest longevity versus these signs that rule over parts like the heart. They tend to just have a stronger constitution overall. Okay, so let's go through this. So first of all, we already talked about the vital force. Leo rules the heart, rules really almost all the areas around the heart, the vena cava, which is a large vein that takes blood from other parts of the body to the heart, the aorta. We talked about the back, the spine. When we talk about it's the back in general is ruled by the sign of Leo, but it's kind of a little bit more like the upper back. Once we get into the lower, like lumbar region, that's more in the sign of Libra. But generally speaking, it's the back. Okay. But the spine, the spinal sheath, which is like a protective, almost covering over the spinal cord. Leo rules the spinal cord. The diaphragm, which is interesting. So the diaphragm is like, it's what controls the breath, and it's what separates the chest from more like down to the stomach area. Okay. And that has a lot to do with our vital force just overall. Okay. And the gallbladder is ruled by Leo, but also under the rulership of Capricorn and Saturn. There's actually a lot of things which I do find very interesting. It seems like over the last 25 years, A lot of people have had their gallbladder removed. I unfortunately am one of them. There are ways that we can help care for our gallbladder. So I just wish I knew the stuff that I know now before I had my gallbladder removed. But the sign of Leo rules the gallbladder, but also Capricorn rules the gallbladder and Saturn rules the gallbladder. Really important stuff that goes on between these signs. We'll get into this a little deeper here shortly. And also Leo has it's kind of shared rulership with the sign of Gemini over the forearms. And I believe this is because when we, lift our arms up, that's in that same area as the heart. Okay. So Leo people, this can have an influence on the forearms. Okay. Now, sun, people born with their sun in Leo. This is where the sun is in his own home. Okay. This is where the sun works comfortably. Again, this is a sign that can have great vitality because the sun's in his own home. He gets to function the way he wants to here. And again, it's like that's in part why the sign of Leo tends to be a very bright, shiny light. Okay, now they tend to be attractive people. They tend to be, again, like playful and courageous, but also can come with like kind of like strong opinions, fixed opinions, and sometimes it can come off as a little bit harsh, like speaking their voice very directly and sharply. That can also happen with Mercury in Leo. We'll talk more about that. Tends to have like a broader upper body, like a bigger back, bigger chest area. Leo people tend to carry their weight like above the belt. Okay, you'll notice a lot of Leo people, certainly not all of them, because again, there's things that can counteract this, but the typical Leo will have like a bigger upper body. And of course, there's, this could be modified between male and female, but overall, it's like a bigger upper body, but more like a narrow hips. Okay, like they tend to have less muscle mass in the hip and leg area. Like, the dudes walking around that skip leg day at the gym all the time, like bigger up here, whether it's muscle or, a beer belly sort of thing could go on with the sign of Leo. Now, moving forward, this is what I think has the biggest influence on a Leo's health. Is a Leo, I kind of already said this before, but I'm just putting more emphasis on it. Leo people really need to have something in their life that brings them joy. They have to be doing something that brings them joy and pleasure, whether if it's creating something or it's exercise or it's their children. The sign of Leo can actually have a little bit of an influence on like the joy that we can receive from playing with children, like children, their innocence and their fun. That's very Leo energy. And it's like when that is taken away from a typical Leo, the vital force can very much go down. Say, for example, like the sign of Cancer, and again, even the sign of Pisces, like the water signs, kind of the sign of Scorpio too, or even a little bit Capricorn could be like this, where it's almost like those signs already operate in a frequency of like the sorrows in the world or the kind of sadness, or so word I'm looking for. There's a certain word I'm looking for and I just can't think of it right now. Maybe it'll come to me. Somber. That's the word I'm looking for. Leo doesn't want somber. Leo wants playfulness. And when there's all of a sudden flipped into a somber energy, that takes a major impact on a Leo. They don't age very well. And what I mean by that, I don't mean like their body or their skin. It's more like because when a Leo starts to get older, they lose the ability, just like anybody else in the world. When we get to a certain age, we're not quite as, active as we were when we were youthful, that sort of thing. And that's another thing that can really kind of have a big impact on the Leo energy in and of itself. Also, they mentioned this already, they tend to run very, very hot. This is a sign that absolutely needs to stay hydrated more than any other sign. I mean, of course, we could talk about Aries and Sagittarius as well. But if you think about, again, for most of us in the world, when it's Leo season, when it's the hottest time of the year, that's the most important time of the year where we're staying hydrated. Leos must stay hydrated. Sometimes, I find this interesting because this is in quite a few of the books. that Leos can kind of end up reaching for alcohol frequently, which what I find I've got several Leos in my life, and none of them have like any sort of like alcoholism. One of them doesn't drink at all. Another one just kind of every once in a while drinker. Um, but I can see why this would be in the books. Like, first of all, maybe some of us out there have heard of the term liquid courage. Sometimes Leo, I gotta get up on stage, I'm gonna do this. And a lot of times they'll have a little bit of that liquid courage beforehand. But it's like the internal organs are saying, I need cold liquids, I need fluids. And so there can be this tendency, again, for reaching for alcohol. And again, that can also obviously lead into having like a beer gut sort of thing. It doesn't have to be beer, any kind of alcohol can actually do that. For dehydration, because this is a sign that is most commonly going to be dehydrated and not even know it because they're hanging out with a bunch of other people who aren't Leos, and those people are fine to go without water for, a longer period of time, versus a Leo really needs to stay hydrated. And honestly, the best thing, if you're a Leo out there and you're watching this and you understand, like, hey, you know what? Maybe I should keep myself hydrated, especially if you live in a warm environment. First of all, quality water. Oh my God, it's so important that people drink quality water. If you're drinking, tap water from the city or whatever, it's run through like a plant, and it's not good water. At least get like a really good water filter, like a Berkey with the, there's certain, if you don't know what I'm talking about, just look up the British Berkfield, I think it's called, water filters, ceramic water filter. There's certain filters that are better than others. Personally, I mean, of course, there's oh boy, what's it called? I can't even remember what it's called. The reverse osmosis water. Personally, if possible, I like spring water, and depending on where I got it from, I'll put it through the Berkey filter. But just really good water with a dash. And by the way, drinking out of a plastic water bottle is not a good idea. The reason for that is what happens is, from my understanding anyway, from multiple sources, that the water bottle, the plastic water bottle, it's supposed to like sit, like after they make the water bottle, it's supposed to sit for like 6 months to really let the chemicals, the plasticides, so they won't leach out. But apparently they're making the water bottles and then immediately filling them with water. And so the water that's coming from plastic water bottles is going to have an immense amount of the endocrine disrupting, stuff that's going to mess with their hormones. And it's basically you're drinking microplastics if you're drinking water out of a plastic water bottle. And I know that's unfortunate. A lot of people don't want to hear that. But if you put just a little dash of salt, not salt like that you would see at a restaurant, not, like table salt, but really good sea salt. And I'm not talking about it. I know this stuff can get expensive, but if it's, if you're just using a little dash, super high quality salt, Celtic salt, Icelandic salt is, in my opinion, probably the best. And then fresh lemon. If you can get it from a lemon tree that's in your area, that's the ultimate way to keep yourself hydrated. And I think that's probably crucially important for Leos to be doing that. Okay, moving forward. Sorry for the tangent. Let's talk about the houses here because this is important. So when it comes to medical astrology, if you picture the natal chart, hopefully if you're watching this, you've at least seen your natal chart before. The circle with the little sections in it that I always refer to looking like a slice of pie. Those are the houses. Now, there's certain houses in the chart that tend to be a little more troublesome. First of all, the 6th house can have a lot to do with ill health. The 8th house can have a lot to do with things like surgeries. The 12th house can actually have a lot to do with what could be referred to as like mental health, but it's really kind of coming more from spiritual things. And even the 1st house, Leo's sun in the 1st house can now actually also be a little bit troublesome, but especially if it's what kind of aspects are coming off of the sun. This is going to be really important here. When we talk about aspects, we're talking about all those lines that go through the chart that are connecting different planets and celestial bodies. Okay, if your sun is in Leo, especially in the first house, and say it's making a quincunx to something like Saturn or Mars, that can be quite troublesome versus, say, somebody who's born with their sun in Leo in the second or the third house can be a great place for the sun in Leo. Okay, these people are going to have less of a just overall tendency for conditions to go on. Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about aspects of, as we go through this, but for now, let's talk about some more serious stuff here. So, of course, Leo can deal, again, depending on how it's aspected and what house it's in, can deal with heart conditions, heart palpitations, aneurysms, especially like aortic aneurysms, any like heart problems overall. And then you'd be able to see, is it something that's like restricting a blood vessel or something like that? You'd be able to see that in the aspects that are coming off of the sun in Leo. Okay. Of course, gallstones. If Leo's, got there's again, Leo has an influence on the gallbladder, and so does the sign of Capricorn. Those signs make what is called a quincunx together. If the sign of Leo's over here, opposite Leo is Aquarius. Well, right next to Aquarius is Capricorn, which that creates a quincunx. Okay, so if somebody's got a quincunx going between their sun and something in the sign of Capricorn, that can definitely create something that would, have to do with gallstones. Okay, and of course, spinal issues or even things like scoliosis. That's a big one for other things we'll go through shortly here. Leo can even deal with like a hot liver. Like the liver is more kind of specifically ruled by the sign of Virgo, also has influence from Jupiter. But because Leo is so hot, just in general, they can deal with a hot liver. Okay, now, this is where things get important. The aspects. So again, if Leo's over here, always opposite Leo is Aquarius. Let's say your sun is in Leo, you don't have anything prominent going on in the sign of Aquarius. Well, the parts of the body that are ruled by the sign of Aquarius can tend to be almost like weak points, or like that part is sleeping. And there's also things that can counteract this, but for the most part, just as a generalization here, the sign of Aquarius rules the ankles, rules the circulation. This is what's very, very interesting, is it? So Leo rules the heart, but the sign of Aquarius opposite that, this is where the oppositions in astrology, especially medical astrology, are very, very significant. The sign of Aquarius rules the electrical body, like what you can envision. If you don't know what the toroidal field is, you might want to look into that. It's an electrical field that is around us that picks up. It's like the sign of Aquarius can be super intuitive because it picks up all these little signals through that electrical body. But that electrical body is functioning through the heart. Okay, so with that said, it's like the electrical body could be a little bit like almost sleeping so much. For the Leo's more like, I'm just focusing on my heart and loyalty and getting attention, that sort of thing, and not so much paying attention to the sensitivities that can come through the electrical body. They can deal with things like circulation issues in the body. And can also deal with things like feet, the ankles and the feet too. I'm just about to talk about this. The ankles or the calves. And that can also have a lot to do with, again, like Leo people, especially dudes, like big chest up here, but then like little ankles because they don't have anything strong in their natal chart that is coming through the sign of Aquarius. But also those quincunxes again. So again, here's Leo, here's Aquarius. On one side of Aquarius is Capricorn. On the other side of Aquarius is Pisces. Those quincunxes are like a disconnect. They can be troublesome spots if for somebody with their sun in the sign of Leo, because it's a disconnect. There's no connection between Leo and Pisces and Leo and Capricorn. Okay. Now, again, so Capricorn also has an influence on the gallbladder. Capricorn also rules the knees, has an influence on kind of the entire skeleton in the body. Leo people can deal with like, it depends on the whole rest of the chart. A medical astrologer, just any astrologer, is really needs to see the entire chart to be able to interpret it. Of course, there's little clues here and there, but for the most part, really, if you're trying to do a true interpretation, you got to see the whole chart. But Leo people can deal with like a weaker skeleton because Capricorn has an influence on the minerals in the body, the skeleton in the body. And if there's a disconnect going between Leo and Capricorn, then those parts, again, may end up not being quite as strong as they could be. Pisces rules the feet. A lot of Leo people deal with feet problems, a lot of them. And a lot of this can also say they got Saturn in Pisces, and that's things like uh, just overall feet problems. But Pisces also rules the lymphatic system. Leo people should really be, everybody should be making sure we're taking care of our lymphatic system, but especially the sign of Leo because it makes that quincunx over to Pisces. Pisces rules the lymphatic system. Okay, so there's that. Now, did I go through everything I wanted to there? Also, I'm going to mention this. This is not a super strong one, but we might as well mention it. So the sign of Cancer comes right before Leo, which, okay, so if the sun's coming through the sign of Leo, the sign that's right above it, the sun, like in astrology, generally speaking, that's what the aspects are doing. They're sending signals or they're beaming rays to other celestial bodies. Well, the sign right before it, as I've said before, it's like it can't make a U-turn through the sine wave. It can't go from the sign of Leo, boop, I'm going back up to the sign of Cancer. And so there can also be issues with the stomach, weak stomach. Sign of Cancer rules the stomach. Also rules the breast. There could be issues with the breast, but I'd say, if anything, more so the stomach. Okay, so there's that. Now, moving forward onto Moon and Leo. So these people, the moon overall, okay, so if somebody's born with their moon in Leo, they receive the lunar energy through the heart, okay, and through the spine. It depends on what degree it is in. I didn't mention this yet. I'm going to bring this out. This is a fantastic book for beginners. Medical Astrology breaks down. Certainly reading this is not going to make you a medical astrologer, but it really does. It's simple and it's organized in a manner that really can help people understand. And that's another thing with medical astrology. Sure, you can watch these videos all day, but it really helps to read the books and then go back and read the books again. And then when you're trying to remember something, go back and double check again. The books are very, very helpful. I'll leave a list of really good books. I'll organize it in the description for people who are beginners and then people who are a little more advanced, some books that I recommend. Okay, now, where was I? Moon and Leo. They receive their lunar energy through this area of the body, generally speaking here. Okay, now, Leo being this, well, let's start here. The moon is really what influences our emotions and our intuition. It's like the feminine part of us. The moon is, everybody's born with a moon somewhere in their natal chart. Whatever sign the moon is beaming through when somebody's born is going to say a lot about how they process their emotions and their level of receptivity. Okay, so Leo being this like dramatic energy, a lot of times these people will have dramatic emotions, but they also tend to be people who can be quite creative. They can be people who can also tend to, it depends on how it's aspected in the chart and what house it's coming through, but these people can tend to enjoy attention as well. But they can also be people, it's like, again, like if you think about when an emotional situation happens, something emotional goes on, somebody's born with their moon in Leo, and you think about this raw, like the fiery sign of Leo, again, dramatic emotions. But at the same time, these people tend to benefit greatly from doing something that they enjoy to help them get past the emotion, doing something pleasurable to get past the emotional turbulence. Okay, now, out of all the placements that I've ever seen, this is very on point. I remember reading this in the books and I've seen it so many times. People with Moon and Leo tend to like deny or even to the point of like refuse medical attention. things that like, oh no, I'm fine. Like their arm is broken. They're like, oh no, I'm fine. That might be an exaggeration, but Moon and Leo people tend to not really want to go, you know, they'll just almost like I said, maybe not necessarily refuse medical attention. That can be it. But what I've seen more is like, oh, no, no, no. But you can see that there's actually some sort of an injury or an illness or something like that going on. Okay, now, again, going back to the houses, this is super important here because, say, for example, somebody's born with their moon in the sign of Leo, it's coming through the sixth house. Okay, again, that sixth house. In modern astrology, the sixth house is like the house of uh, health and being of service, which of course is very true. But in traditional astrology, the sixth house is the house of ill health, like health complications, that sort of thing. And so that moon in Leo, again, like kind of wanting to deny or refuse, where something might need some medical attention, and it's coming through the area of the chart that, really influences like a theme of ill health. That even though the sign of Leo can be strong, I mean, it's not necessarily something where like moon in Leo is generally not like a oh dear, like oh there's going to be health problems here, unless it's coming through a tough house, especially the sixth house, the eighth house. Eighth house has to do with surgeries. Moon in Leo people could end up having to do with a surgery in their spine or their something going on with the spinal cord, something going on with the heart, that sort of thing. Or also again, the 12th house is much more about, it's the house of karma, the house of spiritual debt. It's a very, very mystical and spiritual house. It can even have an influence on things like intuition and psychic capabilities. But it's also like again, traditional astrology was much more blatant with their information. It was described as the house of secrets and sorrows. Okay, so that 12th house tends to like show itself, manifest through more like sorrowfulness or difficulty with like mental function, that sort of thing. And so somebody with their moon in Leo, again, it depends on how it's aspected and what kind of connections it's making with other celestial bodies. But these people can definitely deal with depression that then leads into an actual physical ailment, especially in parts of the body that are ruled by the sign of Leo, but also parts of the body that are ruled by the sign of Aquarius, which opposes Leo, and also the parts of the body that are ruled by Capricorn and Pisces, because those signs make the quincunx. Okay, what else did I want to mention here? Circulatory issues, again, that sign of Aquarius, because if their moon is in Leo and they don't have anything in the sign of Aquarius, that sign of Aquarius is almost like sleeping over there. Aquarius rules the circulatory system and again rules the ankles, rules the calves. So this is where medical astrology gets a little bit more technical, okay? But it's also, even learning all the little technicalities is not just learning the major parts of the body that each sign rules. That's the best place to start, because then you understand then you take it to the next level. They can also deal with like a weak back. For some reason, I can't remember. Oh, yeah, now I remember. GERD tends to be a theme for people with moon in Leo. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that the moon actually has an influence on the stomach as well. Generally speaking, the stomach is ruled by the sign of Cancer. Well, the sign of Cancer is ruled by the moon. The moon has an influence on the stomach. People can deal with, like the acid issues coming up through the stomach, any kind of like hot issues in the stomach, that sort of thing can go on with moon and Leo. So people can also deal with things like heart palpitations, anything that goes on with the heart, and can also deal. And the thing is with moon and Leo people, or if there's a heart, it's like we can even think of this as more like as an energetic thing rather than just the physiological parts, that functions in our body, that sort of thing, just energetically. So somebody's got their moon in the sign of Leo, or there can be other, say it's a sun in Leo, there could be other things that go on. Like energetically speaking here, it's like the heart may not feel like it's getting the attention it needs. And that will tend to manifest with some sort of a physical ailment, even gallstones, okay? Um, Moon and Leo people can also deal with dehydration. Pretty much almost anything in the sign of Leo can deal with dehydration. Okay, so let's move on to now to Mercury in Leo. This is where Mercury is in its fall, okay? And the reason for that is that so Leo's over here, Aquarius is over here. Mercury exalts in the sign of Aquarius. That's Mercury's favorite sign to be in, hyper intellectual. Okay. But when it's in the opposite sign that it exalts in, that's where it's in its fall. It's like Mercury tends to, it's a little bit of a weak spot for Mercury. There could definitely be, there's pros and cons to everything in astrology, every single sign, every single house, every single aspect, every single celestial body. Of course, there's certain things that can, tend to be better than others. But then there's just like a square. A square is looked at as like a harsh aspect, and a trine is looked at as like a lovely aspect. But there's problems that can come from a trine, for sure. There's always going to be pros and cons to everything in astrology. So with that, don't feel like you're, oh no, my Mercury's in Leo, it's in its fall. There's beautiful things that can come from this because Mercury has a very big influence on the nervous system. If we can get really into the nitty gritty about particular parts of the nervous system that Mercury rules over, like the afferent nerves, which are the nerves that take the information to the spinal cord. But really, in essence, it's like Mercury, Gemini, Sagittarius, Pisces, Virgo, a lot of little intricate parts of the nervous system. But Mercury has a very, like the whole picture, when we put the whole grand picture around the nervous system, Mercury has a big influence on that. And also has a very big influence on our communication skills. Okay. Somebody with their Mercury in Leo tends to like speak boldly and speak courageously, and because the information's going boldly through the nervous system, that sort of thing. Sometimes these people can be stubborn with their opinions. A lot of Leo placements, Leo and Taurus, kind of Aquarius too, and kind of Scorpio too, but especially Leo and Taurus, these tend to be the more like, no, I'm not changing my mind kind of zodiac signs. Okay, so Mercury and Leo can deal with, again, heart palpitations, anything with the heart, arrhythmia, definitely, because Mercury's kind of, again, ruling or having a massive influence on the nervous system. Mercury's kind of like a nervous energy. Okay, people who are super mercurial can tend to like have like they're kind of jumpy, kind of anxious sort of energy. That's because Mercury rules over that sort of thing. Okay, so anything that deals with the nervous system or like hypertension, that sort of thing, can come through that mercurial influence. Can deal with neurological pains in the back for sure. Malfunctions or like strange little anomalies that go on in any of the Leo parts, the heart, again, the spinal cord. This is one that I wouldn't say this is a major thing for Mercury in Leo, but can also deal with things like scoliosis or some issues with the spine. I would say it would probably be more like the information pathways, through the spinal cord and the nervous system. Those are the things that might have an impact with Mercury coming through the sign of Leo. But this, again, a lot of this is going to, you want to see which house in your natal chart Mercury in Leo is coming through. Is it coming through the 6th, the 8th, or the 12th house? And this can also be something that could come through the first house. Again, especially if it's harshly aspected, if it's making a strong square or a quincunx, especially to a malefic like Saturn or Mars or even Pluto or Uranus, something like that. Especially so if your Mercury was in Leo and if it was making like a square or an opposition over to Uranus, Uranus is very spazzy. It's like it would really heighten things up, significantly, versus if it's making an aspect to Saturn, Saturn might cool that down, might kind of restrict it a little bit. So again, little very much technicalities to this, but hopefully you guys get the picture here. Okay, now Venus and Leo. So Venus, the planet of love and beauty and harmony. Okay, Venus is Aphrodite in Greek mythology, the gorgeous goddess of love. Okay, So people with Venus and Leo tend to be very attractive people. They tend to be big lovers. They love with their heart. They tend to have a beautiful back, male or female. They tend to have a beautiful back, just beautiful area up here overall. But they also, I've noticed almost every single Venus and Leo person I've met is just overall an attractive person. Okay. And that's, if you think about, it's like, as we've talked about in previous videos, say somebody born with their Venus in Pisces. Pisces rolls the feet. They tend to have beautiful feet. Their Venus is in the sign of Cancer. Cancer rolls the breasts. They tend to have beautiful breasts. So everybody's got a Venus somewhere in their chart, wherever Venus is, that body part, the body parts that are ruled by that sign tend to be like attractive on those people. But Leo ruling the heart, I mean, hello. So I think that plays a role in Venus and Leo people being attractive. Certainly not all of them are going to be super attractive, but overall it's an attractive placement that tends to love courageously, tends to be like a placement. This can happen with Venus and Mars and Leo, and also Sun and Leo. The people that they see something they like that just go up and just put their arm around it, like, hey, how you doing? Like a courageous kind of, when it comes to, again, like something that we're attracted to, generally like another person, or even say it's an object, like, oh my God, I just love this lamp, and I'm just going to courageously buy this lamp. Well, that's very Venus and Leo. What's the word I'm looking for? Like extravagance, that sort of thing. Okay. Now, again, they can have a beautiful back, or that part of the body, but also, Venus can also like almost, what's the word I'm looking for? Relaxes things. Okay, Venus will relax, generally speaking, unless there's an aspect that's counteracting this or modifying this. But whatever sign your Venus is in, those body parts that are ruled by that sign will tend to be a little more relaxed. So somebody with their Venus and Leo may have like a heart that just kind of is maybe a little bit weak. It's a little bit too relaxed, that sort of thing. Or even like a kind of a relaxed back. They could end up with a back injury because it's not like a strong placement for the back. It's more about beauty in the back, that sort of thing. That can also go on with the spinal cord, that sort of thing with Venus and Leo. Can also do with things like low blood pressure, like a lazy, heartbeat, that sort of thing. It's not again, it's like, say, Sun in Leo is a strong heart, unless it's, again, being attacked by another celestial body. But Venus in Leo is more like a weaker heart, or a heart that's just not ready to, be big and strong kind of energy. But again, also tends to be a very beautiful placement. And again, that's also it's so important to look at what house the Venus in Leo is in. Is it in the 6th or the 8th or the 12th, or even the first house? Especially if it's in the first house and it's making harsh aspects to, again, especially Saturn or Mars or Pluto or Uranus, then there can be troublesome things that go on with the Leo parts of the body, or also things that go on with the parts of the body that are ruled by the sign of Aquarius or Capricorn or Pisces, because it's opposition or quincunx. Okay. Now, moving forward to Mars and Leo. This is one of my favorite ones to talk about. Mars is the planet of war. Mars is what influences aggression and frustrations, and Mars is what makes us take action. Mars rules our muscles and our adrenals, and Mars is even just the symbol for Mars, like the circle with the arrow coming out. It's Mars wants to go penetrate. Mars almost wants to attack. Okay. So people born with their Mars in Leo tend to be extremely courageous people. Of course, there's, I'm thinking of a family member who she's got her Mars in Leo, but she's a Libra, and she's like super chill and always wants to balance things out. She's a Gemini rising. She's not necessarily an aggressive person, but every single job that she has ever applied for her entire life, she's my age, she's gotten the job. Guys that she likes, she's been married for a long time now, but, guys that she likes, she just go up and talk to them and, just be able to like kind of get what she wants out of life, because Mars is in Leo. Mars, it's not like exalted in the sign of Leo, but you could kind of understand when you think about Mars's energy. I mean, generally speaking, Mars does pretty well in all the fire signs, but in Leo, it's that playful, courageous. People can be extremely strong. But again, it's going to depend on what house it's in and how it's aspected. But okay, so moving forward here, what I put in my notes: very courageous, bold, creative. I already put in the tends to get any kind of job they want. I kid you not, every single Mars and Leo person that I know has gotten, and it's like when I'm giving a reading and if I see that their Mars is in Leo, especially if it's coming through like the third house or the 10th house, sometimes even the fourth house, I'll be like, you're somebody who's like gotten every job you ever applied for. And they're like, yep. Okay. Now, when we think about like Mars rules over things like injuries and accidents and burns, Mars is a hot and dry energy. Mars is a malefic. Okay. The two main malefics are Mars and Saturn. And they're like when as medical astrologers, the first thing we look at is the sun, because that's the vital force. And of course, we look at the houses, we look at all of it. But the main things that we look for after we look at the sun is what's going on with Mars and what's going on with Saturn, because those seem to be the troublemakers. Mars rules things of a hot and dry and irritating and acute nature. We'll talk about Saturn when we get there. But so with that said, if you picture, say, Mars in Leo in the eighth house, the house of surgeries, these people can deal with, let's like their heart is, irritated. Something's like attacking their heart almost. Okay. Or say that their back, they, have some really crazy injury that involves their back or their spine, or again, also could be the gallbladder, heating up the gallbladder. This can also have an influence on the liver. Again, the Leo doesn't specifically rule the liver, but if there's too much heat going on in the body, then yeah, the liver needs to be cooled down. Okay. Or again, in the sixth house, Mars tends to do pretty well in the sixth house. But still that sixth house can create health concerns. Okay. Or say Mars is in Leo in the 12th house. It's like frustrations of mental health can go on. Or if Mars is in the first house in the sign of Leo, these people can tend to be very accident prone because Mars rules accidents and Leo's courageous. Okay, now, and again, I don't mean to be repetitive, but it's so important, especially when we're talking about the malefics, especially when we're talking about Mars and Saturn. But this is also something to look for with Uranus and Pluto. Kind of go on with Neptune too, but Neptune more diffuses things. But Mars and Saturn, I'll just say this now. Saturn rules over things like chronic disease, things that are very difficult to make go away. Mars, again, we just talked about it. Mars is irritating, hot, dry, rashes, that sort of thing. Pluto could be very toxic. Pluto can like mutate people's DNA, that sort of thing. Uranus is more shocking. Okay, so if your Mars is in Leo, if it's making a connection of especially the opposition or a square. So now when we're talking about the malefics, we could talk a lot about a square, which would be if Leo's over here, here's Aquarius, up and down, we're going to have Scorpio and we're going to have Taurus. Those parts of the body, sign of Taurus rules the throat, the neck, the taste buds, the lower jaw. Scorpio rules the genitalia, rules the colon. Okay. So if somebody's Mars is in Leo, those parts of the body, the throat and the neck, the Taurus area, or Scorpio parts, it's almost like Mars is red hot, irritating ray hits those things as well. It's like a reflex that goes on. But then also the quincunxes that go on between the sign of Leo, Pisces, and Capricorn. Okay, so those parts of the body, which we already mentioned, Pisces is the feet and lymphatic. This is super generalization here. Capricorn rules the knees and basically the skeleton. Also has a little bit of an influence on the skin. That's probably one of the main key things to look for is a connection that's going on between somebody's Mars placement or Saturn placement, the squares and the oppositions, and also the quincunxes. Okay, so let's move down here. Let's keep going through. Okay, of course, things like inflammation of the heart, high blood pressure versus Venus in Leo is more like low blood pressure, back injuries, inflammation of the spinal cord, aneurysms, wounds to the heart or the back or the spine or even the spinal cord, dangerously high fever. Say, especially if somebody's like Sun is in Leo and Mars is in Leo, those people have to be very, very mindful with their body temperature. Okay. Now, also, I guess, of course, gallbladder issues, especially if there's Mars in Leo and then there's something going on in the sign of Capricorn as well, because that creates a quincunx. Leo and Capricorn both have rulership over the gallbladder. Okay, now moving on to Jupiter in Leo. So Jupiter is the great benefic. Jupiter brings joy and abundance and luck and wisdom. These people are born Jupiter in Leo tend to be very like giving and charitable people. They tend to be big lovers. They tend to be, that's the word I'm looking for. Like they like to like gift. They like to share, that sort of thing. But Jupiter is also what, even though he's the great benefic, so now we're talking about beneficial energy, even though he's beneficial, just like Venus is beneficial, but Venus can create problems sometimes. Jupiter can also create problems sometimes. Jupiter rules fat, any kind of fat, whether it's from, a piece of meat or an avocado or around the waist or somebody's buttocks, whatever it is, any kind of fat or oil is ruled by Jupiter. And Leo being this big, grandiose energy, people born with their Jupiter and Leo can have this tendency, depending on so many other things in the chart, but to expand, especially above the waistline, like above the belt, can have like kind of a bigger upper body, bigger stomach, that sort of thing. Okay, now also can deal, large torso is very, very common. Again, aspects and houses are going to play a huge role here. Again, same thing. Sixth house, eighth house, 12th house, or even potentially the first house. And the first house is going to have a major, like what if you got a planet in the first house, it's really important to see what aspects are coming off of that planet. Okay, they can deal with a heart attack, of course. This is another one could deal with high blood pressure. In fact, Jupiter rules the arteries in the body. Okay. And so, if you think about Jupiter ruling the arteries, I mean, this could even do with like coronary artery disease, something that involves the arteries that are, getting too much energy coming through with this courageous, I will kind of energy coming through the sign of Leo. Okay, now moving on to Saturn. I'm kind of buzzing through the things that are maybe not quite as, oh boy, but better look out for this, because I want to focus on Saturn here. Saturn comes next. Saturn is, again, he's the great malefic. Saturn, we all got Saturn somewhere in our chart. It's not like this is only going to be bad for people with Saturn and Leo. Saturn can always be a troublemaker. He's not always going to be a troublemaker, but he tends to be a little bit of a troublemaker, no matter where he is. Okay, now Saturn in Leo, this is where Saturn is in his detriment. What I mean by that is that, so Saturn rules the sign of Aquarius, one of Aquarius's rulers. Okay, now we're getting into nitty gritty things. Some people, this is going to go way over your head, and some people are going to be like, come on, Aaron, get it on. We already know this stuff. But Saturn rules the sign of Aquarius traditionally. Again, Aquarius is opposite Leo. So with that said, if Saturn, Aquarius's ruler, is in the sign of Leo, is in his detriment. It's not his favorite sign to be in. Saturn wants to be in the other sign, opposite Leo, wants to be in Aquarius or Capricorn, because Saturn rules Capricorn as well. So this can definitely be a troublesome placement. And I'll just say this right off the bat. I have my own Saturn in Leo. And it's very interesting because, like, in my chart, any astrologer could look at my chart and go, okay, this lady's like a super nice lady, like very sweet. I'm always just been very kind, authentically compassionate when, going through high school. Like, we got little nicknames underneath our, picture where I was like friend, like I won the friendliest award or whatever. And just a very like warm, authentically caring person. But Saturn rule in Leo. Okay, Saturn restricts. Saturn makes things like he calcifies things. Okay, Saturn creates blockages and discipline things. And I do have like kind of a shut off heart. Like if somebody tries to get a little too close to somebody, my heart shuts down. It's like this little, like, nope. It's like a cold heart kind of energy, even though like I could, am a very loving person, the cold heart kind of energy can come through with Saturn in Leo. It's not always going to be the case for people with Saturn and Leo, but it definitely tends to be a placement where Saturn just doesn't like to be. However, it can also be because Saturn also has a big influence on strength. Saturn rules the bones in the body. Okay. And basically the whole like structure of the body. Saturn actually has an influence on this, a little bit of on the skin as well, because the skin holds the body together, holds all the stuff into the body. So with that said, a lot of times people born with their Saturn and Leo can also be very strong. People tend to, Saturn has a lot to do with knowledge. Saturn really likes to, it can be like the bringer of wisdom. People with their Saturn and Leo tend to be people who they love learning like vastly learning through it, like things that are considered maybe even like advanced knowledge, that sort of thing. Saturn and Leo people tend to be drawn to that sort of thing. Okay, now they can also have this tendency to like uh, Leo has a lot to do with our talents. Okay, being able to show our talents. Like I said, Leo people tend to get up on stage and they just have no problem, blah, 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 doing whatever they want and having no problem being the center of attention. Saturn again restricts. A lot of times people who are born with their Saturn and Leo it's almost like there's something in them that restricts their ability to be able to express their talents or their creativity. Okay, now in again, going back to Mars and Saturn being the great malefics, this is another one that's going to have a massive impact on what house the Saturn and Leo is in, especially Mars and Saturn and the sun as well. But okay, so if you got Saturn and Leo in the sixth house, there can tend to be more like weird health concerns involving the heart, especially if it's making a harsh aspect, especially over to Mars or something like that. If it's in the eighth house, could be potential for having surgeries on the parts of the body that are ruled by the sign of Leo. If it's in the 12th house, there can be, some sort of Saturn and Leo in the 12th house can actually be a little bit of a doozy, even though Saturn tends to enjoy being in the 12th house, is in his joy in the 12th house, but still there can be that talking about like a restriction, an internal restriction from wanting to share our talents and creativity. That can be a very strong one, Saturn coming through the 12th house, which that's, it sounds like she's not talking medical astrology, but these things take an impact on our physical health. It's like the emotion of the experience and what's going through the system, all of these things that we're talking about, even if it doesn't sound like medical astrology, is going to have an impact on the parts of the body that are ruled by the sign of Leo, but again, also opposite that in Aquarius and quincunxing that in Pisces and Capricorn, and also signs that are squaring it, especially again, malefics. Look at the squares, Taurus and Scorpio. Okay, so Saturn and Leo people can definitely deal with things like, again, a heart attack. This would be different than a heart attack coming through Mars and Leo. Mars and Leo would be like explosive, like hot kind of heart attack, versus Saturn would be more like there's some sort of a restriction going on. Maybe there's a restriction in the arteries or something that's, the blood trying to get to the heart, but Saturn, he calcifies things, okay? Saturn hardens and restricts things. So it'd be a totally different kind of heart attack than somebody born with their Mars in Leo. Okay, can stiffen the back. People walking around with a very stiff back. That's another thing, is I've definitely had back issues going all the way back into my, oh boy, like early to mid 20s, dealt with back injuries. It's been a lot better since I kind of learned how to take care of it. But in fact, I was told back in I think I was like 28 years old when the doctor was trying to tell me I needed back surgery. Hallelujah. I did not allow for that to happen. Okay. Chronic back problems, chronic problems with the spinal cord, problem, again, scoliosis, something along those lines. Any kind of chronic issues involving the heart, the spine, spinal cord, could even potentially be in the forearms or the gallbladder. Okay. Now, this is what's also interesting is that like I said, my Saturn is in Leo. I don't have anything in the sign of Capricorn, but I had my gallbladder removed when I was, oh boy, I don't know. I can't remember how old I was. I can't remember how old I was when I had it's been many, many years. But that's another thing. I wish I would have known the things that I know now. We don't necessarily need to have our gallbladders removed. Okay, moving forward. I'm no doctor. It's not medical advice. Okay, now moving on to Uranus. So Uranus, last time Uranus was in Leo, it was 1956 to 1962. And then Uranus will be in Leo again in the year 2040. Okay, so Uranus, as mentioned earlier, Uranus is this radical, reckless, spasmodic, electrical kind of energy. Okay, Uranus is what influences things like spasms in the body. If somebody's got a really strong Uranus in their natal chart, say it's coming through their first house or something like that, they tend to deal with like, whoa, like spasms in the body. That's very Uranus energy. So if you think about Uranus in the sign of Leo, spasms in the heart, something that has to do with an electrical, impulses or, this could even have something to do with, spasms in the back, strange anomalies in the back or the spinal cord. Of course, not everybody born with their Uranus and Leo is going to deal with these things because, again, it depends a lot on what house it's in and how it's aspected. But overall, it's like a spazzy energy that's coming through. And in fact, there was some notes. I did a little bit of research here. So a defibrillator, which is like what somebody it like dies on the table or whatever, when they shock their heart to try and bring them back, a defibrillator, that was invented in 1947, but then it was the later 50s and 60s. Is that right? Yep. Later in the late 50s, early 60s is when they kind of fine-tuned it. And then all of a sudden it's like, that's a total Uranus and Leo thing to shock the heart. And that's where it started becoming more accessible and more doctors started using it. I can't remember all the little doctors' names, but I did some research on that because I thought to myself, well, gee, when the heck was that thing invented? It seems like it would be popular right around the time Uranus was in Leo. And it was. Spinal anomalies, malfunction of the heart valves, electrical disturbances. We kind of already talked about this. Arrhythmia, of course, again, one. And another thing to think about is like Leo, the being creative and stuff, the Leo being ruled by the sun and what creates life, really. In that era, 1956 to 1962, the very revolutionary changes that we saw go on, because Leo, again, it's like the sun's sign. We think about this was a time when all of a sudden conservatively dressed like poodle skirts and that sort of thing faded out. And all of a sudden it was like the very beginning of, the revolutionary hippie phase. That's very Uranus and Taurus as well. And we think about, the revolutionary changes, the freedom. Uranus wants freedom. So I also found that very interesting. Okay, now going on to Neptune in Leo. So Neptune, last time Neptune was in Leo was 1930. It was 1916 to 1930. And will not be back on the sign. Neptune will not be back on the sign of Leo until the year 2080. So we don't really need to put emphasis on this, but just know that Neptune creates fogginess and weaknesses. Neptune rules, it's very diffusive and calming, Neptune is. So just as an example, somebody born, if it's in a harsh house, say their Neptune is in Leo and it's in the 6th house, they may deal with like a very weak heart that can't function so well. That sort of thing could go on, but that's way down the road. Now, Pluto in Leo. Last time, so I know some of you out there, I believe some of you even watch my channel here, who were born between 1940 and 1958, who have your Pluto in Leo. Okay, so Pluto takes a very long time, anywhere between like 8 and 30 years to go through one zodiac sign. So obviously not everybody born within that time frame with their Pluto and Leo is going to have all the same issues that could come from Pluto, having an impact on the parts of the body that the sign of Leo rules. But one thing that's really important to look out for, if you've got Pluto and Leo and it's conjunct something else, if it's conjunct your sun, say your sun is in the sign of Leo and it's conjunct Pluto, that Pluto can be kind of a toxic energy. Pluto, ultimately, like a Pluto influence is to flush things out. Pluto is the bringer of death and rebirth, or degeneration and then more powerful regeneration. So that could be something to take into consideration here if you've got Pluto and Leo and it's conjunct something. But at the same time, it's like, let's say your Pluto is conjunct Mercury in the sign of Leo. Okay, then there could be toxicity through the nervous system and coming through this like kind of willpower kind of energy with the sign of Leo. But again, it's going to depend a lot on what house your Pluto and Leo is in, how it's aspected. This is another one, but it's coming through the first house. If you got Pluto conjunct your sun in Leo in the first house, that can actually definitely lead to things that are of a pretty serious health complication. And it may or may not involve the heart. It may involve more like the sign of Aquarius, or again, Pisces, or Capricorn, or Scorpio, or Taurus, those parts of the body. Okay, now let's get into North and South Node. I feel like this is a little bit more of there's a lot of people who are born in generations of today that are born with their North and South Node in the sign of Leo. So the North Node, if your North Node is in Leo, you're receiving an excess amount of this Leo energy. You very well could have like a broader kind of area up here. Again, it depends on the rest of the chart. You might want to be a little bit extra mindful, especially if you've got your North Node in the sign of Leo and there's another celestial body right next to it. Then you're receiving an even heavier dose of whatever the energy is of that celestial body into your heart area. And again, this is also going to depend if it's watch out for the 6th, the 8th, and the 12th house, or potentially even the first house with North and South Node in the sign of Leo. But that North Node in Leo is pumping more of this Leo energy into this part of the body. You might want to be extra careful of your back, especially more like the upper back. Might want to be a little bit careful with your spinal cord, that sort of thing. I mean, I don't necessarily know how somebody's going to be careful with their spinal cord. And you know what? Going back on this, I didn't even mention this, but again, I'm not a doctor. This is not medical advice. But for protecting the heart, Hawthorn relaxes the arteries around the heart. And then there's also motherwort, which kind of just relaxes the cardiac system. But they're both very, very gentle. Okay, it's not like something like a prescription medication for the heart or something like that. They're especially in a tea form. I personally like both motherwort and hawthorn in a tea rather than a tincture. But those herbs can actually help relax the heart, especially if I drink those quite regularly. Again, my Saturn is in Leo. Even if your sun is in Leo, you might want to take some gentle, again, this is not medical advice, but you might consider in taking some sort of, herbal remedy to help support or relax this area of the body. Maybe not if your Venus is in Leo, and maybe not if your South Node is in Leo. Let's get into that South Node. So the South Node becomes a weak point. If your South Node is in Leo, you could end up, again, especially like when I say later on in life, kind of like going more into adulthood. There could be a weakness in the heart, a weakness in the back, a weakness in the spine, a weakness in the gallbladder. Okay, because that South Node is kind of like a drain point. And again, especially if your South Node is in the sign of Leo and there's another celestial body next to it, say it's Mars or something, then it's draining more of that Mars energy out with it. So those are things that are important to take into consideration, especially conjunctions with the North or South Node. Okay, now Leo rising. So, Leo rising, literally anything and everything that I just went through, there could be potential for. But a lot of this is going to depend on where your sun is in your natal chart. Okay, because if you're a Leo rising, that means that the sun is the ruler of your chart because the sun rules the sign of Leo. So you'd want to look to see where your sun in the sixth house or the eighth house or the 12th house. Another thing to take into consideration here is if your sun is in the sign of Leo, how is it aspected? Is it making any harsh aspects? And it doesn't even necessarily have to be a harsh aspect. If your sun, if you are a Leo rising, if your ascendant is making really any kind of an aspect to either Mars or Saturn or potentially even Uranus or Pluto, those can tend to be troublemakers. But I can't just say, well, yeah, if you're a Leo rising and your sun, makes a square over to Saturn, it's totally different than if your sun is making a trine to Saturn. So there's all these little intricate parts to this. But overall, if you are a Leo rising, again, you might want to consider keeping this area of your body a little bit extra protected. Your heart, your spine, and again, like the whole system through the spine, the spinal sheath, again, the spinal cord, all of those things you might want to be a little bit extra mindful with. Okay, so I think I'm going to leave that there. If you would like to dive deeper into this so we can actually interpret your whole chart, you can schedule an astrology reading through erinwageastrology.com. I do hope to hear from some of you. And until next time, namaste to all of you.